My First Quilt Show is brought to you by Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Aurifil, perfectly suited for every quilt project. Hovels, cut it close with Hovels. Omnigrid, providing quilters with specialty rulers and accessories for over 30 years. Riley Blake, colorful, playful, and sophisticated fabrics that can't help but bring a smile to your face.
Hi there, I'm Sarah Gallegos and this is My First Quilt Show. And in this episode, we're going to be creating the brickwork pattern. This is a layer cake friendly project. You need a layer cake and a contrast fabric to go along with it. And what's really special about this quilt, if you're new to sewing, it's very easy to put together because you never have to worry about matching seams. Everything is offset. If you look here, when we create the quilt, we have some larger rectangles at the top, and in every other row we have smaller rectangles, and that allows all of the pieces to be offset, so you never have to worry about matching up seams in each row. So it's a really great, easy project to make and a lot of fun to do. So we get that out of the way. And it starts with a layer cake. This right here is a half layer cake, so you would need 2 of these or a full-size layer cake, and they're about 40 squares in each one. And a layer cake is a 10-inch square pre-cut collection. So you could get this of any fabric collection that you like. It's just 10-inch squares. And then again, you need a contrast fabric that matches with it. So we're going to start by cutting some of those 10-inch squares in half. So I'll take a few of these. And don't be afraid to take a couple at a time. If you're really careful about taking them out of the package to your cutting mat, you can cut through a few different layers of your layer cakes at the same time. I'll usually do 3 or 4. So we want to line this up with the 5-inch marking on the ruler. And this is an 8-inch ruler, so it's a little deceptive. You can see that my edges aren't quite perfectly matched there. I'll scoot that over. There we go. So we'll mark it, line it up with the 5-inch marking, and I kind of put the tips of my pinked edge of my layer cake with the 5-inch marking on the ruler. Then you'll take your rotary cutter and very carefully, nice and straight, cut that in half. And now you have several of the rectangles for your quilt. Now on a few of them, it tells you in the instructions that you want to subcut your 5 by 10-inch rectangle to 3 by 5. And that's what allows you to stagger the top edge of that quilt, offsetting your rows. Okay, so just like that. And then you've got some scrap for your scrap bin. So you've got 5 by 10-inch rectangles and 3 by 5-inch rectangles. The next thing that you need to cut is from your contrast fabric. You'll need lots and lots of 5-inch squares. So here are just a few of them. So you're going to have a lot of different 5-inch squares that go in between each of your printed rectangles. So here I've got a bunch of them pre-cut. And this is where you get to have a little bit of design fun. We like to lay out all of these pieces before they're sewn together, and that kind of helps you to make sure that you evenly distribute the fabrics within the quilt. In each layer cake, oftentimes you'll have 2 10-inch squares of the same fabric, which you have cut into 2 5 by 10 squares. So you've got 4 pieces of each fabric. So it's nice to kind of lay things out before you sew it together, just to make sure that you evenly distribute those 4 pieces so they don't all end up in the same row or right next to each other. It looks a little bit more finished that way. So on every other row, you're going to start with one of your 5 by 10 rectangles, and then you place a 5 by 5 contrast square, and then another 5 by 10 rectangle, and you just keep working down. And then on the next row, you will start with one of your 3 by 5 rectangles and a 5-inch square of your contrast fabric, and then another 5 by 10 rectangle and a 5-inch square of your contrast fabric, and then you build down. On the rows that you start with those 3 by 5 rectangles, you also end with a 3 by 5 rectangle. And if you've started with a 5 by 10, you end with a 5 by 10. So you don't have to worry about figuring out what belongs at the top or at the bottom. You're always going to start and end with the same size rectangle, and then you've got your 5-inch squares in between each piece. And so I like to just kind of lay the whole thing out and then start to sew. And when you're ready to start sewing, you're going to use a 1/4-inch seam, and I like to just bring that top piece down to the bottom, and I'll line it up so that I've got the little peaks of my pinked edge along with the cut edge of my white fabric, and then we'll sew a 1/4-inch seam. Perfect. And then to the bottom of my white piece, I'll take another one of my 5x10 rectangles. And I don't worry about on these as I'm creating the rows, pressing in between each and every seam. I just create the entire row and then I press all my seams at once. It saves me a little bit of time that way. And then we would do another 5-inch rectangle, or 5-inch square, right at the bottom here. And then you just continue building from there. So again, at the bottom of this, I would have another one of my 5x10 rectangles until you create your rows. And here I've got a couple of them done already. Just kind of get some of this out of the way real quick. It's busy fabric, it's a lot to look at. There we go. There we go. So here is one row that starts and stops with the larger rectangles. And a second row. So now I would have my two same fabrics right next to each other, so I'm going to flip that row end to end so I get a little better contrast that way. So here we've got our first two rows, starting with the 5x10 rectangles and starting with the 3x5 rectangles, and you can see that I never have to worry about matching up those corners where the white blocks come together. So I'll flip those on top of each other. And on this row, on both of these, I have pressed all of my seams toward the darker fabric, especially with the white blocks in there. You want to make sure that you're pressing toward the darker fabric because with the blacks in these fabrics, you would see that right through the white fabric in your seam allowances. So you want to make sure that you press them away from the white and keep them centered as you go. You can feel my seam flipping over there. Stop and reposition a little bit here. There we go. So I've got my first two rows of my quilt sewn together. And you would just give that a good press, and there you go. And then you just continue building out until you have all of the rows for the full width of the quilt. And from there, all you have to do is quilt it and bind it. So if you're like me and you like buying those 10-inch square packs because they're fun and they're pretty and they're great to look at, this is the greatest project to pull those out and start sewing with them. I'll see you next time on My First Quilt Show.
My First Quilt Show is brought to you by Babylock, for the love of sewing. Aurifil, perfectly suited for every quilt project. Hovels, cut it close with Hovels. Omnigrid, providing quilters with specialty rulers and accessories for over 30 years. Riley Blake, colorful, playful, and sophisticated fabrics that can't help but bring a smile to your face.